Good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay in starting. My name's Chris Deeran. I'm the Director of Enlighten, and welcome to this afternoon's event, which is a discussion about the condition and future of the retail sector across Scotland and the UK. We all know that the world of retail is changing quickly, that high streets are a bit of a shadow of what they once were. Digital commerce takes up an increasingly large part of the market. Meanwhile, inflation's edging up, especially for food. And the last UK budget had significant implications for retail, as it did for other businesses. Retail being the UK's largest private sector employer with a presence in pretty much every community, that is obviously significant. We know there are issues around crime, shoplifting and violence in stores. Overall, these are pretty challenging times for a sector which, in a nation of shopkeepers, we all hold dear to our hearts. And so with the next UK and Scottish budgets coming into view, we've got a Holyrood election in about 7 months. We want to look today at what the sector's asks are of government. We want to explore what's happening to consumer spending and behaviour, to retail performance and employment, the impact of the cost of living crisis that we're still living with, the impact of technology and government policy, as it's touched on, and really what does the future of retail look like in the UK and in Scotland. To help us think this through today, we've got a really fantastic panel. So we have Dr. Chris Hamer, who is Director of Insight at the British Retail Consortium. We have Debbie Harding, who is Chair of the Scottish Retail Consortium and the Board Director with Dobbies, the garden centres that are rooted in Scotland, excuse the pun, but have centres across the UK. And we have Colin Temple, the President of Shoe, the shoe empire, which has a footprint, I'm not sorry for that one, across the UK and Ireland. So some real expertise in the room today to talk to us about the issues mentioned. We're going to have our panelists make some opening remarks, and then we'll have a chat. But we're very keen to hear your thoughts and questions today, which you can give to us using the chat function on Zoom. So please do engage with what's being said or any extra thoughts that you have, issues that we don't cover in the conversation. And we'll try and get to as many of those as possible before the end. So we're going to start with Chris, Director of Insight at the British Retail Consortium. So I'll hand over to you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. I think you, the overview you just given really does provide a good context to where the industry is at the moment. Obviously the budget is coming up, and that's really crucial in terms of what Rachel Reeves will do to restore consumer confidence, because what we have seen over the last few months is a real long shadow of poor consumer confidence. So while people are feeling slightly better off, particularly sort of the people in the higher income thresholds, they are starting to save more. There's too much uncertainty, and that's depressing consumer spending and rising levels of savings, basically. So what we're hoping for is that Rachel Reeves will, really start to focus on how business investment can be unlocked again. The effects of the taxation that was imposed as a result of the last budget, £7 billion of additional costs from employers' national insurance, the national living wage, as well as then the packaging tax that was introduced last month, has really put a lot of pressure on retail to absorb those costs. And obviously we're seeing some of that being passed through, particularly on food of late. Of course, the figures that came out today showed that food inflation is slowing, and that's probably just in the golden quarter that retailers are investing in some price cuts to try to encourage us to spend more up front, but that's not a reflection of the wider market. So it's quite a tough market that retailers, and it would be great to hear from Colin and Debbie, of course, on this, a tough market to operate in, both from the demand side, consumers not spending quite as much, and then on the cost side, having to absorb an awful lot of costs at the same time. So there's definitely all to play for in terms of policy decisions that are made as a result of the budget towards the end of November.
And across the UK and specifically in Scotland, Colin, are the trends pretty much uniform that you're seeing?
Yeah, apart from kind of weather-related trends, because of the slight difference in the weather, albeit it's terrible everywhere. So, what we are finding is that it is, it's a common. We're a fashion-led business, yeah, and we're very much in the want business rather than need business. But I'd probably say that, yeah, our business is dictated by shifting channels from our clicks and our breaks, yeah, which we can chat about later. But at the moment, our business it is in apparel and footwear is driven by two things. It's either scarcity or price, yeah, and they're the things that are driving it, and that's a difficult combination to have, yeah, when the costs are going up, and you might have a fixed price business, yeah. So I would say you were pretty well set. We've got some special over in the Republic of Ireland. It's a little bit different because we've still got a few Brexit issues in terms of importing stock there, yeah. But generally, as a UK kind of based business, yeah, generally it's pretty there. London's still a little bit slow in terms of footfall, and the tax there has helped, just deter the bigger spenders, yeah. But it's more at the luxury end than the shoe end.
Is there anything else you want to say, just as by way of introduction, Colin?
Yeah, well, I've been retailing for a long time. I've been with shoes since 1988. We've seen a lot of changes. We were an early adopter online, and about 40% of our business is done digitally. And we're going through quite a profound change with regards to our store economics relative to our digital economics, yeah. And if you can't master both of those, you've got a tough business, yeah, because you've got to make money on both, yeah. And that's just a little bit out of balance with the cost of operating stores, and both in terms of staffing and occupancy. And we've got a few challenges because we sell other people's brands, so we don't have the price elasticity that other retailers have. So we're a kind of fixed cost business and a fixed retail business. So a lot of it comes down to desirability, service, and efficiencies.
Okay, Debbie, over to you on behalf of the Scottish Retail Consortium and Dobbies.
Oh, yes, so
Double
good
two
afternoon,
hats.
everybody. Two hats, and that means two perspectives. I think, firstly, from the SRC, just a little bit of context about what we do and who we serve. We are part of the British Retail Consortium. We are the voice and the advocates of retailers in Scotland. David, and Ewan are our main spokespeople, and they're both on the call today. Across the UK, the BRC represents over 200 major retailers and thousands of smaller ones. And in Scotland, we have over 24,000 shops, and we support over 228,000 jobs at last count. So we are a vibrant part of the communities. Everybody is in one of our shops. We are pivotal to our communities and support a huge chunk of the Scottish economy. My day job at Dobbies, I'm Chief People and Corporate Officer. Dobbies is a much loved Scottish brand, but we are also a UK-wide business. We are very much a bricks and mortar retail business, and quite different to Collins. We've got over 3,500 people in 54 locations across all four nations. We're headquartered here in Scotland. We've got 200 people working near Edinburgh and 11 stores in Scotland. The first thing I'd like to get across today is really, I am passionate about retail. I've mentioned it's part of every community. It is a force for good. Our customers don't only come to us for product, they come to us to spend time in our stores. They have relationships with our colleagues. It is a really great industry to be part of, notwithstanding the challenges. It is fast-paced, it's innovative, both on bricks and mortar and online. And at a really humbling level, we are the entry-level employer for millions of people across the UK. And most people in some shape or form have worked in retail, and that is a huge privilege. We see people from all walks of life and in all sorts of jobs. And that's really what makes me passionate about my job, and really passionate and focused on making sure that we can somehow straddle the challenges that we have today and ensure that our businesses are here for the long term, both in terms of profitability and to support jobs and to support our economy.
Okay, so just starting on consumer behaviour, the trends that we see, and coming back to you, Chris, both Colin and Debbie mentioned that division between bricks and mortar and online. How is that playing out? How profound has that change been? Do we have data for the sector as a whole? It'll obviously be different for different, it'd be different for Dobbies, where people want to go and hold a plant, as opposed to maybe at Shoe, where they can order online or whatever. But how would you sort of pull all that together as an analysis?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that we've shopped, the way that we shop has changed. So there's now often we talk about different channels, but I think consumers making choices about where to shop and what they're going to buy, often goes through a whole cycle of different information gathering, assessment before, price comparison before making an ultimate purchase on either online or in a store. So each of those sort of challenges still, each of those channels have still got a really important role to play. And we're also seeing more recently, retailers expanding into the marketplaces, so offering goods from third-party sellers on their own platforms, and so becoming almost a technology player as well, and providing those sort of services, not just selling goods. So, I mean, we certainly, from during COVID, of course, when we were all locked down, then there was a huge spike in the amount of online purchases, and that's sort of stabilized now. About 38% of online sales in the UK is done online. And that does vary massively between the types of products that consumers buy. So, on the far end of the spectrum, computing, 3/4 of goods are bought online in the computing category. If you compare that to something like health and beauty, it's into like about 11 or 12%. So there's a lot of opportunity for innovation in this space as to how AI, for example, would come into the mix to start to encourage consumers to spend both online, but also to change the retail spaces, the physical spaces, as to what do you get, as to Debbie's point, the conversations, the kind of engagement with consumers that really isn't always achievable in an online experience.
And maybe to Debbie and Colin, so obviously the shift towards online, do we expect that to continue? Do we expect that 38% to tick up over time as people become more technologically literate, or just their habits change? And how much do people still want to shop in the old way, the kind of pre-COVID way, although obviously it was changing before then? Debbie, what would you say to that?
In our business, most of our customers want to come in, touch, feel, see product, but online has a huge part to play, and we see a lot of growth opportunity in the garden centre sector for online, actually, and Dobbies has an opportunity to really grow that because not many people play in that space. That said, our biggest opportunity in online is probably around driving experiential and upselling to our customers. So if you were to think about somebody buying a plant, take a very simple example, using AI tools, we can follow up with them to educate them on how to care for their plant, what feed they need, what compost they might need, and almost look after them through the life cycle of their plant. That drives two areas of opportunity for us. It drives footfall back into stores to buy those products, and also creates that enduring relationship with us for whatever plants they buy. And that is how we see an opportunity online. It will never be the lifeblood of our business. We are reasonably well insulated today against the Amazon effect, but it is both a challenge and an opportunity. For where we sell commodity products, we have to remain price competitive with online, and that's been a huge shift in our business in the past 5 years.
Colin, just coming to you on that as well. You obviously said that you are selling a fair amount online now. Do you expect that to tick up? I mean, I still like to go into Shoe and look at the Converse before I buy them, but I might look them up online first and then just see, or afterwards, and see what the best value is. Interested as well, because you've been quite thoughtful in online and tech. How is it that people are using technologies to inform the choices that they make?
Well, I think about 75% of our kind of store-driven consumers use technology as part of the kind of buying process, yeah. And also the store consumer and the online consumer are probably the same, yeah. And what we can do is that we can influence them a little bit with regards to how they do it. So, I'm going to be very brand specific. So we had we got an early launch with a line of kind of boots, Dr. Martin boots. I don't know if I'm going to get fired for saying that we're promoting the film Wednesday, yeah, which is right in their hot space, yeah. So with that, what we're able to do is that we would appeal that scarcity, and that would have appealed to a lot of customers that might not have been shoe customers, yeah. So that kind of is a way that we can kind of influence what's happening. But the other thing is we are looking at our store economics relative to our e-commerce economics, and gradually the consumer is going to have to pay for the level of service they're getting through whatever vehicle they decide to shop with. Yeah, so more and more retailers are actually passing on the cost of your processing internet returns. Yeah, and that's getting put to the customer. And what we find by doing that, customers are generally now bringing shoes back to the stores. Yeah, now that's great for us because it gives us an opportunity to then get them to buy something else. When we get returns on the internet, we don't get a big ability to actually sell them something else, whereas in stores we can. Yeah, and also the economics of processing a return for us is a lot cheaper than handling it, whereas sending it out from our centers a lot more efficient. Yeah, so what we can do is that we can influence what the customer wants, but we've also got to give the customer the way they want it. And if they want it and they're a price-driven customer, you'll probably shop around. If you want it quickly, you might go into one of the stores. If you want to buy it quickly, but you want to buy it from somebody that that if there's a problem, you can pop into one of the stores and sort it out. Yeah, just being able to articulate that and share that and make that easy for the customer. Yeah, will drive it. There will be place for retailers. I think that we might mature at 50-50 with 60-40 at the moment, and that might be driven by the size of our stores. But for definite, there is a place for retailing, which is great. But you've got to fully understand the economics of what you're doing. You've got to offer what the customer wants in a way that you can make a profit. Yeah, gone are the days when you can set up a big internet business like Amazon did and lose money for lots of time, lots and lots of years. Yeah, we've got to be profitable. We'll never be as profitable as we were historically, but there's still profit to be made out there as an omnichannel retailer selling other people's brands. That's what we believe. That's very specific for Shoe.
Yeah, I'd like to talk a bit about high streets because obviously it's something that probably is close to all of our hearts living in the communities that we do. So I live in Stirling and we have a Shoe, we have a Dobbies. But you walk through the middle of Stirling, and I think like many places now, it seems to be a mix of charity shops and Turkish barbers and tattoo parlors and coffee shops, and really not much more. Maybe pawn shops as well. Not much more than that. The shopping centre itself has some decent stores. So is the high street as we know it done for? And if not, what can be done to save it? Chris, what would your thoughts be on that?
My immediate response is no. The high street isn't done for. I think that as we've always seen retail spaces evolve and change, and the way that it's a reflection of how we shop and how we use those spaces. I think there are examples across the country of good spaces. So ones that are full, that are vibrant, diverse, range of hospitality, leisure, there's residential and retail. And retail's got a critical part to play in that. It's just at the moment, I think, hamstrung by higher rates of taxation and burden. And that's really what needs fundamental reform in all parts of the UK. To reduce the burden on physical retail spaces. So I think you will see more evolution. I think there's a question in the chat as well about this as to, how do you change spaces so that they're not vacant. People don't want to walk down high streets that are vacant and boarded up. And that calls upon both planning regulations and authority, making sure that, spaces can be changed more easily, that landlords have got their role to play to make sure that they're pricing at a level that means the economics of a store works. And so many retailers say, they would love to open more shops, but it costs too much to operate. And that's the fundamental issue that we need to tackle as a country, as to how we change these spaces so that it works for everyone.
So when you're talking about areas that are doing well, that are sort of bucking the trend, if you like, what are they getting right?
They're getting the mix right. So kind of what we're finding is that shoppers for a very long time, if we look at the footfall data that we gather each month, retail parks perform particularly well. Now footfall's been depressed for a little while, but retail parks have outshone all other retail locations for a long time, and part of that is the ease by which consumers can get to those places. It's free parking. They can get a range of different options at the same time. They don't have to, it's not just a destination store. And so that's an exemplar of what you need to do right. And so insofar as it doesn't cost a fortune to park somewhere, you're not in it's not congested in terms of trying to get into the centres, but also the mix. So people want to do a variety of different things in one location. It's not just retail, but also leisure, hospitality, and of course we're seeing more build to rent properties. We obviously have seen over time that retail is somewhat overspaced. The changing nature of the retail industry means that spaces are switching across into residential, but we've got to make sure that the mix is right. And if the mix is not right, then you don't attract people to those centres.
Debbie, from a Scottish Retail Consortium view, what would your view of the future of the high street be?
Exactly in line with Chris. In Scotland, one of the very big challenges is probably business rates. So for retailers looking to utilise and move high street space, rents are high. We don't often talk about rents as they're not directly influenced by government. Our experience is they are upward only, and landlords, like everybody else, are seeking to cover all of their additional costs. So rents are steep, particularly in prime high street locations, even if there are challenges in occupancy. And in some cases, business rates. In Scotland, there is no rates relief for smaller units. Unlike in England, that can make a Scottish business case quite hard to justify. Dobbies had 6 high street locations. We closed all of them at the beginning of last year, simply because the costs of rent and rates outweighed any opportunity for us to drive profitability. And that's where we see a real short-term challenge that plays out across the high streets. In Scotland, the government position is to deter out-of-town development. That brings a challenge for us in my business. But they are trying to encourage investment back into the high street in that way. But the planning regulations and time to move through the changes that Chris has talked around take a really long time to materialise. And I think that should be an area of focus to accelerate the return to the high street. And then, of course, there are all the usual things around parking costs, accessibility. If you try to park in Glasgow city centre, it is a really expensive venture. You have to go there with purpose. Things like that are the detractors, but these are also the things that are within our control, more broadly speaking, to help support that reinvestment.
Colin, you obviously, of the three here, have the major high street presence. How have you sort of watched the change happen and the impact that it's had on your business, and what would you like to see done in a way that might help them be reborn?
It's very hard. When I joined the business, for all store coverage, British Shoe Corporation had 800 stores, and then it went down to 400, and we've got about 100 plus stores that we think we've got UK coverage. So the high streets kind of changed because of the internet, and everything's polarizing, and and gravitating. So in the early days of Shoe, we'd get our sales from probably 30-40% more brands than we're doing now. We get the majority of our sales from perhaps top 10 brands. So everything's kind of, despite the fact there's more choice, it's kind of polarizing and it's shorter lived. So I'm afraid the answer to the high street is really it's not fit for purpose. And because you've got such a big blend of institutional landlords, family landlords, it's generally spread out. The ability to contract it and just get an inner core, considering it's not a greenfield site, is very, very difficult. And what will happen is that consumers will kind of vote with the feet, and if there's a reason to do that. So it really is a bit of a conundrum, because I think the size of retail has been dictated by this blend between bricks and clicks. So some people, signed up for 100-year leases 60 or 70 years ago. It's a real muddle. So I would say it's going to take some hard fixing, and also local government just don't have the resources to actually think in a way that they can sort this out in the next decade or so. So what you could do is with the best that you've got, and I know there's some kind of issues here that come up with the questions, but it's about experience, it's about service, it's about giving people what they want. It's what people are prepared for, and the reality is that people are going to have to pay more for less goods and value them more, so that and again that's another kind of polarization which will perhaps take a long time to manifest itself, but I guess it's going to have to happen. Yeah.
Debbie, just to come back to you, Colin mentioned local government. We haven't really talked about the role that local government plays. Now, I'm sure the SRC is speaking to councils about the impact on the high street and the evolution that Chris talked about of the high street into a new form that will have more residential, more leisure, as well as retail there. What kind of conversations are you having? Do they get it? Do they understand the damage that's being done?
I think that we have, at a sort of fragmented local authority level, it is quite difficult to get engagement. So across our member base, there are, I think the statistics are something like there's 25 to 30% less people in the planning teams now than there were 5 to 10 years ago. So there's a huge recruitment and succession problem in a lot of local authorities. In our business, we see that it can take 2 to 3 years to get planning consent through. Or longer. I have one site that I've been trying to sell with planning consent for 7 years, and lack of resource is the continued reason that the council say they can't get it through. So I think that is probably the singular biggest problem, as Colin has alluded to. There is no resource to think about this laterally at local authority level. They are all under spending constraints as well. They've all got black holes. So therefore, trying to find the right place to drive investment is a really difficult call for local authorities to make, particularly in the context of education and indeed all the cost pressures they too are absorbing with the wider UK impact of national insurance and national living wage having gone up. So at a national level, we have very good engagement with the Scottish Government. At local level, it's much harder to break through. That manifests itself in delays at best and very little engagement from planning teams in particular at worst, which I think keeps us in as Colin would say, in a real muddle. And it's quite difficult to work out the best way forward there. And certainly we don't see unified thinking across local authorities in Scotland as well, which is a watch out for us.
And do you think then that the Scottish Government, as a sort of, holding the ring on this, if you like, as the sort of central authority, could be doing more to try and either make it easier for councils or to bring them together or to set strategy to ensure that there is a modicum of progress being made?
Absolutely. I think the Scottish Government have a huge role to play in settling a consistent set of principles across all local authorities for development, both in retail and more widely. The single most important thing the Scottish Government can do in the short term to accelerate growth is address business rates. If that can be reduced, brought down to lower than in England, that will open up immediate access to economic growth on the high street and others, and create potentially the room for some investment and longer term planning to go into place.
I'd like to just touch on crime, which is something that when we had an earlier discussion, I think was raised as arguably being the number one issue facing a lot of people in retail. I presume it's certain types of convenience stores, and I think we've maybe all seen, or most of us will have seen, videos online of people walking in, shoving stuff down their trousers or into their pockets, and then just strolling blithely out. And there might even be security there who don't challenge them or whatever. But there is that threat of violence. I'm sure some of this is a cost of living crisis. Has it also become a cultural issue? And what is the impact on people who work in retail who are at threat from this, Chris?
I think, we run an annual crime survey to ask retailers what they're experiencing, and we certainly saw in the last crime survey, a significant wave of crime, including organised crime in the country, and so retailers are not only faced with the cost of losing the goods, of course, the cost of trying to prevent the crime, but more importantly, the effect that it has on the people working in the stores. The incidence of violence against workers has increased substantially. Now, I don't know whether that's a cultural thing, but I think the resourcing within the police service and knowingly not addressing retail crime has led to a free-for-all in some respects, which is never conducive to a safe working environment and a pleasant place to shop. So there's definitely obviously challenges around that. We are seeing that more responsiveness, more prosecutions going forward, which is absolutely what's needed. And we've also had the government legislate on violence against shop workers. We now need to make sure that that's properly enforced by the judiciary and prosecutions brought forward by the police wherever that happens. But yeah, it is a serious issue. There's lots of cost pressures that are facing retailers, and it's got to be a safe working environment for our people as well.
And Debbie, just to go back to you before I go back to Colin. What do you hear from your members in Scotland on this issue?
So I am firstly very glad you mentioned it. This is the first time I've been on any form of retail call where this has not been mentioned in the first 5 minutes. Retail crime is the singular biggest challenge in Scotland to all retailers, no matter which part of retail they're in. So I was thinking about this before we joined the call. 1 in 5 Scottish people from the last time we did estimate work have witnessed theft from a shop in the past year. And while you may think it is quite tricky to steal a lawnmower from a garden centre or a bag of compost, retail crime is happening everywhere, and it's a really wide societal issue. People don't seem to see it as a crime. We, across the sector, will see not just the traditional stereotype of bored youths nicking stuff, organised crime. You have got everybody in every class stealing from shops without giving it a second thought. Attempting to estimate the size of this is really hard because you don't always know what you've lost, especially if you're operating in bigger stores. But the latest estimates we have in Scotland is it costs the whole sector about £170 million a year. And these are costs and numbers. The real impact is on the people on the front line. Every single day, particularly in convenience retail in local communities, store colleagues who are very often in low-paid entry-level roles are facing into the threat of physical violence, threats, being attacked. We have stories of this every single day. The good news is that the Scottish Government and Police Scotland are listening. The Scottish Government, I think, has been well publicised, committed £3 million to improving frontline policing to support with retail crime in the past year. That has been hugely welcomed. It's an important first step. The real ask from us now is to have that sustained and built in to the continuous programme of policing across Scotland. It is the only way we can tackle, number one, the perception that this is a victimless crime. It is not. And secondly, to make it safe for everybody who works in or shops in our shops. But it is, above all else, my business has an awful lot of challenges, but across the sector, retail crime is the single biggest one that affects us all.
And this threat must have an effect on staff retention and recruitment in the first place. I guess people thinking, why would I, take a relatively low-paid entry-level job and then have my physical safety put at threat?
Correct. They would rather go to a call centre where they are not facing into people day to day. Mental health absence and work-related absence on the back of crime is escalating rapidly. We have a partnership at Dobbies, and obviously BRC are partnered with the Retail Trust, which is the main wellbeing charity for across the UK for people in retail. And retail crime is one of the biggest drivers of absence in the workplace and mental health challenges for our colleagues. And that is a hugely concerning position for us as employers.
Colin, how does this affect you? I suppose people won't necessarily steal one trainer, although they might if they can only get a left foot.
Yeah, well, retailers like to have a good rumble about things and a good moan. If there's one thing I'm blessed is that the nature of our retailing is that we're not as exposed, with regards to that. And, I don't feel that, it's an issue for us. In some ways, it's a bit more sophisticated because things like your forgeries, 200 quid pair of Uggs, people bring them back for a refund. We've got to use technology and in an obliging way kind of establish if they're ever bought from us. And we've got to train our staff, but when people are coming into corner shops and convenience stores and just kind of wholesale kind of looting them, we don't suffer from that. So as being part of the the Scottish Retail Consortium, it was an eye-opener for me to understand. And prior to joining Shoe, I was a trainee manager at Woolies, Woolworths, and it was almost again shoplifting. It's a very sinister thing now, and I think there's a comment here how it's underreported and the profound effect that has on staffing. We're at the lesser end of that in our bit of retailing, but it is pretty profound, and I certainly wouldn't undersell just the effect it has on the industry and society as well. It's scary.
Just to move maybe on to the sort of higher end of recruitment. Obviously, income taxes are higher for well-paid jobs in Scotland. You're both headquartered in Scotland, but so I presume you're recruiting people from across the UK, maybe Ireland, maybe globally as well. Is this sort of tax level having any impact on your ability to recruit talent from outside Scotland at a senior level where they are going to be paying a higher rate of income tax? Debbie?
So yes, we currently, for want of a better phrase, import 30% of our head office team from England. So first of all, there's not a huge pool of retail talent in Scotland, so we are seeking to grow and develop that so that we can sustain our headquarters here on a long-term basis. What we have found as we recruit for the more senior roles is that attracting and encouraging people to come and live in Scotland is a non-starter. Now, whether it is perception or reality, the divergence in the income tax bands actually starting at the very lower end of the 40% bracket is a huge disincentive for people to come and live in Scotland. And we joke in the office that England is now a tax haven from an income tax perspective, which are possibly the most ridiculous words that I have ever heard, but it is a very real factor for us. But what that means in real terms is we've got people coming in and contributing to the business on a part-time level. They are not contributing to the Scottish economy more widely. They're not living here. They are flying in, flying back out. And that is a lost opportunity for us to grow and develop people who are based here in Scotland. And whether or not it's a retail skill set or otherwise, the things that you learn and work in retail are transferable to every part of business and the economy. And that for me personally is a huge concern, because you can see over the longer term that if this divergence continues, we will have a retention problem in senior roles. And the Scottish Government are aware of our position on this, but tend to look at net migration as their metric, as opposed to the number of people who are resident in Scotland in the more senior roles. And that is hugely important to the longevity of our business in Scotland.
Colin, does that mirror your experience in any way?
Well, I can't sort of vouch for Debbie's experience. Mine's a little bit different, because as a footwear retailer in your based in Livingston, just outside Edinburgh, we've never been in the epicenter of our kind of I guess our trade, our business. Northampton based, it's London based, it's fashion. So we've for quite a long time run a kind of serviced office in London. So at the senior level, we've not kind of found it. One thing we always found was that we could never get our Scottish-based people to move down south, before all the taxes, And I'm from the northeast of England, and the taxes are, a more senior level, a little bit more, but not worrying anymore. We also have a culture of working from home where it makes sense, So it's not as profound for me. When we go to market, we generally are pretty relaxed where people are. If we had a logistics manager, we definitely need them where our warehouses are. But with regards to buying and the way that we buy, we're pretty relaxed either way. We don't find the need to ship people up. We do occasionally have got to get people, senior people up, to meet as a leadership team. But increasingly we're doing that through teams. So I think it's an issue, but not such a big issue for us. Because of the nature of our business.
Just before we move on to questions from the audience, the thing I wanted to touch on, which was kind of new to me when we had the discussion earlier, was the role that AI can play, not just in terms of the consumer, but in terms of the supply side, if you like. Chris, can you talk a bit about how AI is feeding into the business of retail as people learn how to use it properly, the ways that they can use it to make themselves more efficient or whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody that's given it a go and had a look at look at the AI models and tools that are available at the moment, it's an eye opener, I suppose, in terms of the prospect for the future. I think inevitably with these sort of waves of change, we sometimes overestimate the impact in the short term and underestimate it in the long term. So clearly with the pressures on retailers to absorb costs coming from the outside, AI is a positive opportunity to look at efficiencies from there, and also to support colleagues with supporting their customers and providing advice, etc. So I think we're still in the early stages of what exactly that will look like, and how AI will become integrated within the online experience. But I mean, I think I was watching a YouTube video just recently where it was about 20 years old. We were saying, well, will the internet take off? Will online shopping take off or not? And Jeff Bezos was there maybe 3 years into his business, saying, well, we're selling a lot of books. So things change, and I'm sure in 20 years' time it'll be quite revolutionary in terms of how the nature of work has changed, as well as how we consume.
Apologies. Colin, I think you've actually used AI or tried it out in some of your warehouses, etc. Could you talk about some of the specifics that you've got an eye on?
Yeah, AI to me, is going to change. But with regards to how you can use it, so AI in isolated instance that can give you decisions that are quite unique, and that you don't need to dovetail them into your operations, because it's a dovetailing into all the etiquette you've got with regards to systems and etiquettes in terms of pulling and making decisions. Yeah, that's a tough bit. So I'll just give a very basic example of where I see it. I see it as like an Excel at the minute. Is nobody does books anymore. You use Excel to add, pivot, to do all those things. Yeah. So the way that I see it is, I'm trying to give it. The example I use is, I went through my IT guy, said, look, explain it to me. And one of them, basically, we use these little, we call them iPods. They're actually iPhones, little scanners that we use to serve customers to see if this pair of shoes that they present the employee with is actually in stock in the stock room, so we don't make unnecessary trips. Yeah, and that's where technology works. Yeah, so we buy literally hundreds of these mobile phones, and we've got a kind of storage room. And he just went in, took a photograph of a big stack of iPhones. Yeah, there must have been about 90 or 100 of them, so high, so deep. And all he did was take a photograph and just ask a few questions to say, what is this? How many of them are there? What are they worth? Yeah. And in seconds, they came back with the right count. They'd identified what model of iPhone they were, and they'd put a value on it because they could get all that. Now, that's a splendid isolate, but you can use it for stock checking. But could you use it? The next extension is, if you've got a 40-foot truck at a warehouse with mixed cartons on with a manifest, it's not too different in terms of the variances. Yeah. So the way that I see it is, I'm trying to get my kind of guys at the back door, just one person to basically be given, on the phone with regards to Copilot or ChatGPT, whatever you want to work at, yeah, and just get them to say, look, how can you at an operational level get it to work for you in isolated instances that bring value, yeah? And I'm pretty sure that we will get our money back on that pretty quick, yeah? So that's like the kind of lower granular end, yeah? And then at the top end, yeah, I mean, ultimately it should be making allocation decisions, forecasting fashion, but, I saw this a little bit with regards to basically working out what the searches were online, yeah? By looking at searches, you could determine what was going to happen next and what's hot, but it's never really materialized, yeah? So I think the point that was made that, yeah, it's going to be a game changer. It's not going to change things in the way that everybody thinks it's going to be, in my humble opinion, so quickly, yeah. But it's going to be out there, and it's going to grow, and it will be, we'll look back in. I don't think it'll be 10 years. Yeah, I think it'll be in a couple of years, and that's where the real value will come. Sorry, Chris, you're on mute. Yeah?
I know, we've never learned of it. Just wondered if you wanted to add anything, Debbie, before we go to.
Yeah, I've got sort of two perspectives on this. I think number one, labour is for a lot of retail businesses the single largest cost. And as those costs go up, you will want to divert your labour hours and cost to meaningful contact with your customers, to deliver good service, to upsell and so on. So therefore, we will absolutely look to AI as one of the tools we use to improve efficiency and agility across the business. There is a huge opportunity. We are starting to do bits and pieces of this to automate back office operation, start to use AI for labour scheduling to help us get the right people in the right place at the right time according to trading patterns, help with stock replenishment and things like that. The other flip side of AI that we are very alive to is that AI responses are now the very first response that you will get back from Google. So not only are we thinking about AI from an operational side, but how is that influencing customers' decisions, signposting, what they do and where they go. So what we are also thinking about is, right, SEO optimization, making sure the information we put out there and the sources that Copilot and ChatGPT are pulling from are giving accurate or desirable information to our customers. So if people are looking for guidance on plants, we want to make sure that we are being signposted as a UK's leading garden centre retailer. That's where you go to get these things. And at any point now, you can Google anything, you will get an AI generated response. I think it's really important for retailers to think about how that tool that all people are using, WhatsApp's got it, everybody's got it, that we are getting the right output for our businesses to direct customers in the right way. And that is a huge journey, but one that's made us really thoughtful about our online presence and what information is there.
Okay, well, let's move on to the audience now. Colin Mason, you have a question about vacancy rates, if you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, I live just outside Kilmarnock. I used to be on an organisation called Celebrate Kilmarnock, and I've been monitoring the vacancy rates over time, and they remain well over 20%, stubbornly. Although, so really just a question, what can we do, if anything, about it? And to what extent is this driven by the kind of myopic ways in which the property ownership is often a factor, and sort of offshore ownerships and so on. And I've also heard it said about, I mean, I mentioned the BHS store has been empty for 10 years or more, and it's all boarded up and so on. And I've heard it said that companies are sort of incentivized to kind of strip out the store to minimize their tax exposure, which seems to be crazy. So to what extent is the way which empty units are taxed influences makes it harder to bring them back into use again?
So who would like to take that?
It's really quite hard, because I think the only way to kind of fix these city centres, the smaller sort of towns and marketplaces, unless you're a kind of pretty place that's get a lot of footfall for, say, like somewhere like St Andrews, which is, you just don't have that level of vacancy rate there. You've really got to get, for want of a better word, compulsory, purchase of these units, because I couldn't say who the ultimate owner is of the property, the BHS property, because it could be an individual, it could be a corporation, it could be just there people just can't afford to do anything with it. So it's all very specific, But unless somebody can actually sort of say, right, we're going to have this kind of inner bit of retailing, that is going to be suitable to how we see it in the next 5 to 10 years, it's just going to keep happening, unfortunately, I can't answer the tax issue there. I know that a lot of people who've got obligations. So we take 10 years rent, or 10-year leases, and if we've got a store that's not profitable and we can move out of the town, or we can move to a better spot, what we might do is that we might bring a temporary trader in, and I know that that helps us from a rates relief, But with regards to properties that have been empty for a long time, that's not really within my experience. I don't know, Debbie, if you've got more experience with that.
I think part of the solution here comes back to planning. A lot of these buildings are sitting empty because they don't have planning consents for change of use or for alternative uses, or to be subdivided. If I think of the High Street in Perth, Debenhams closed years ago, and that is a massive unit that doesn't really have any natural, obvious use for it now in a high street like that one. But I understand the main challenge there is getting planning consent to be able to do something different. That in turn requires investment in spare cash, and a lot of businesses simply will not have the capital available to them just now to undertake those refurbs go through the planning consent, and then take on all the well-documented challenges of running a retail business. So I think it's a multifaceted one without a straightforward answer. I think the answer, Colin, really will sit in holistic town planning. And I think that goes right back to the heart of where local authorities' priorities and expenditure are, and that needs to be driven at national level.
And Chris, is that coming back to your point about those town centres that are actually doing well? Have they've wrestled with this and they get their planning done more quickly, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think Debbie's made the point around the lack of planning officers. I think one of the other things just to consider is around the monopoly that local councils have over providing building warrants, and there's that's been opened up in England, and whether that's an opportunity in Scotland to provide more building warrants, officers that can provide building warrants in the first place. I think there's a question around red tape altogether. Not just, could we have more officers to enforce more red tape, but actually, is there an opportunity to strip out some of that red tape? Because, the government at a UK level, and I think, everybody would agree growth is generally good for our economy. Unlocking growth is typically achieved by not having more and more regulation. So, there's undoubtedly issues around landlords and are they pricing the properties at the right level, and trying to provide a taxation regime that incentivizes landlords to put those spaces to good use. But I think ultimately it's the planning regulations that need to be looked at and stripped back wherever possible.
Okay. D Smith, I only know you as D Smith because that's what it says on your thing. You've got a question about the key ask?
Thanks. It's Doug Smith. It's a question just what would the key ask of the panel be to each of UK government, Scottish government, local authorities and landlords if you had one question and one ask to put to each of them?
But Chris, do you want to go first on that?
Yeah, I think it's pretty simple. It needs to reduce the cost of operating businesses. Retailers are in the business of providing goods and services to consumers and providing employment opportunities and growth potential, as Debbie alluded to. It's one of the brilliant industries where you can start on the shop floor and work your way all the way up. And I'm lucky to have done that as well. But I think the cost to operate is far too high, and we need to have that stripped back to enable the economy to grow.
I guess for me, it's the government doesn't go to an empty well when it's thirsty and needs to drink. Yeah, and I would say that if you look at how individuals are taxed, you've got to earn the money to be taxed. Yeah, and I would say that it's quite pivotal that if you were to look at the way that retail or property is taxed. Yeah, could the tax regime change so that it's done in a similar way? Yeah, that if a property is profitable, people stay in it, and they can take the share of the profits. Yeah, a little bit like turnover rent with a landlord. Yeah, so I know it totally turns on the head the whole kind of regime, and it takes away the certainty of the tax income. Yeah, but I'm just saying the whole thing's just bust. Yeah, and it needs to be re-engineered, and if you've got businesses that can be profitable, and they're doing that through the auspices of being in a particular store, that should be taxed as opposed to the store itself, because we do have unprofitable stores, but overall, if you were to tax a business in a different way, it's just one option. But you did ask, so that's what I'd be asking for, is a total revolution of how businesses are taxed, and it's going to be taxed on profit as opposed to occupancy and other things.
And lastly, Debbie.
So for me, Doug, I like a multi-pronged attack, and in the hope that at least one thing will stick. So, and you did say for each of them. So UK government for me will be National Living Wage and NICs. Think very carefully about what they do in the upcoming year. For context, and this is, I can say this publicly, that cost my business £4 million this year. We're a loss-making business trying to get back to profitability. That was not helpful, to say the least. So that would be my ask of UK government. Scottish government, with a very sort of personal lens here from the SRC perspective, continue the investment in retail crime. It will be the singular biggest thing that will improve the livelihoods of the over 200,000 people that work in retail. Local authorities relax the planning, get more flexible. And Chris, to your point, that goes both to planning and also to building warrants. One of the biggest blockers for people like Greggs, for example, who are a member of the SRC, is getting planning consents in place to open up new stores. It slows up their development programme. And for landlords, again, I think if you've read anything about Dobbies in the past 2 years, we went through a restructuring plan last year where we forced our landlords to engage with us on meaningful rents. It was a very expensive and convoluted and aggressive way of doing it. But we needed to do that to secure the survival of the business. So my ask for landlords would be to, I think, be realistic. Long-term leases with upwards-only rent reviews doesn't work in this market. If you want to protect the yield in your investment in your sites, get into a more flexible arrangement with your tenants that reflects the ups and downs of the reality of trading. At best, that is turnover-based rent. Otherwise, it is working together in partnership to secure the long-term benefit of their investments. I think there's a real opportunity for us to work better together there.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Debbie. I suppose it's been potentially a bit gloomy looking at the various challenges, even though we have covered some of the opportunities as well. So just before we end, I'd like to ask each of you to leave us with an optimistic view about the sector and its future, if you like. So would someone like to go first about why everything's actually going to be all right?
It's going to be all right because people need to buy stuff. Okay, so that's a very simple level. People need and want to buy stuff. In our business, we are in turnaround and we are year on year, we are growing. Not as fast as we would like, but we are growing. And I think the bright future is in experiential retail and giving for our business, but more widely. We employ a lot of people. People need to buy things. I don't think you'll find a sector where there's more innovation or efficiency. We are very lean businesses. We're not just retailers. We're running distribution. We're running marketing businesses. We're running finance teams, all of these things. We've got a huge part to play in the economy. And notwithstanding all of the challenges, we've got people who are really committed to making that difference for our customers day in, day out. And that's why I still work in retail despite the challenges, because I think there is a future there. We work really hard. And I think the big thing I would offer up at the end of this call is, and we do see it to the Scottish Government quite regularly, we are really good at reducing costs. Why don't you employ us on a consultancy basis and we will help you strip down your operating costs to return some money back to the Scottish economy? They have not yet taken us up on that offer. But I do think that retail is a champion and a leader of running businesses efficiently. And I think that we have been resilient through every single crisis that you can think of for many, many years and will continue to be so.
So you're offering to run a Scottish Doge, are you, Debbie?
Sometimes.
I'd give you the job right now.
I don't think I want to be the Elon Musk to the Scottish Government. However, that offer remains open. I'd be very happy to talk them through some ideas. We've got plenty.
Chris?
Well, I'm backing Debbie's campaign to open up Dodge and work on the efficiencies of government. So yeah, I mean, look, next month is pivotal. It will be key in terms of what Rachel Reeves chooses to do, whether she's actually going to go for growth or she's going to tax more. And I mean, the one positive thing is that I mean, consumers have got a bit more cash. Fewer people are saying that they're struggling with their finances and they're building up savings again. So, those savings, just like we had in COVID, not as big, but still like we had in COVID, there'll be savings there for retailers to entice consumers to part with their cash. And so it'll be we're in golden quarter. There's plenty of opportunity still to go. And like Debbie and Colin has said, it's an innovative sector. Retailers have got amazing muscle memory from the pandemic, the agility in which they tackle the market challenges. So I think there's all to play for, of course, in this market.
And Colin, the last word goes to you.
Okay, well, I'm afraid not as serious as that. We're in the one business, we call our business affordable escapism, yeah? And given the fact that there's so much that we all want to escape from, I reckon our business might do quite well in the short term, yeah? So that's how I see it. So forgive my flippancy on that, yeah? But look, people enjoy retailing, I enjoy retailing, and I just happen to be in a sector that people want it. And, hopefully we make people feel good and just have, like I say, a little bit of escapism, a little bit of lightheartedness, and I think want to shop, yeah, and also physically as well as digitally. So the future's bright for us, yeah. You just got to be efficient, as the boys and girls say, yeah. So
Well, amen to that. So it just remains for me to thank our panel for a really enlightening, which is always appropriate for enlightened discussion today. I think we've shed a lot of light rather than heat, and certainly I and others will be leaving this call much more informed about the issues. And we'll be watching what happens at UK government, Scottish government, local government and landlord level as we go on, and hopefully we can return to this conversation before too long. So thank you again to the audience for attending, and thanks to our panel.
okay, well, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Bye.